Will members please take their seats? Having been informed by the town clerk that we have a quorum, I now declare the meeting open. You may recall we finished Articles 1 through 8, and we're starting with Article 9. We actually finished another article. So there are 15 articles in the warrant. 9 of them are done. You can't hear me?
Yeah, it's not coming in.
Oh, I'm sorry. I am soft-spoken. Is that any better? Not really? All right, hold on. Is that better? Yes. Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. So we had a 15-article warrant. We have finished Articles 1 through 8 plus another article, so we have 6 left. We're all going to do our best to complete this town meeting tonight. We are starting with Article 9, which you will find on page 20 of your warrant. Article 9 is to amend the zoning bylaws, Section 4, the grandfathering change, to see whether the town will vote to amend Section 10 of the general bylaws, known as the zoning bylaws, by striking the words. Yes, sir. Yes, I'm aware of that. Thank you. But it's also here. I guess the chairman of our planning board is trying to save you the time of having me read this, and so I'll assume that everyone has read the article, but what's before you is always the motion presented by the warrant committee. At the time of the printing, the warrant committee had no recommendation. I'm sure you all grabbed the pink sheet coming in the other night, and on page, well, they're not numbered, but on the 4th page of the pink sheet, you will see that there is a new recommendation, or the printed recommendation, and it is recommended the subject matter of this article be referred to the planning board. Does anyone wish to discuss that motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the recommendation of the warrant committee say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. It's unanimous. You have it back, Mr. Whiteside. Article 10. Article 10, the article written in the amendment and the motion are substantially the same. I will read to you the recommendation, which begins at the bottom of page 21. This will require a 2/3 vote. It is recommended the town vote to amend Section 10 of the general bylaws, known as the zoning bylaws, adding the following after the word building in the 3rd sentence of Section 5, provided that with respect to a building constructed before 1950 in the term story, as used in this paragraph, shall not include a basement so long as the finished floor height of the first story is no more than 6 feet above the mean grade of the ground contiguous to the building, so that Section 5 as amended shall read. A1, building heights in residence AA, A, B, and C districts. In a residence AA, A, B, or C district, no building, including dwellings, accessory buildings, buildings for educational or religious use, and any other structures of whatever sort shall be erected or altered to exceed 2.5 stories or 35 feet in height, whichever is less, provided that if the building is set back from each street in lot line 15 feet or more farther than is required by Section 6, it may have 3 stories but shall not exceed 35 feet in height. The Board of Appeals, upon a finding that additional height is reasonably necessary for use of a building, it will not be detrimental to the neighborhood in which the building is located, may authorize by special permit a building for religious or educational use not to exceed 50 feet in height with no more than 2 stories. The term story, as used in this paragraph, shall not include a basement so long as the finished floor height of the first story is no more than 4 feet above the mean grade of the ground contiguous to the building, provided that with respect to a building constructed before 1950, the term story, as used in this paragraph, shall not include a basement so long as the finished floor height of the first story is no more than 6 feet above the mean grade of the ground contiguous to the building. Does anyone wish to speak to this motion? Mr. Whiteside, you're recognized.
Alexander Whiteside, Chairman of the Planning Board. The zoning allows buildings of 2.5 stories. The story does not include a basement. To qualify as a basement under current zoning, the finished floor height of the first floor can be no more than 4 feet above the mean grade of the land surrounding the building. Many older buildings have a finished floor height of more than 4 feet, and hence the basement is considered a story, and the building is restricted to 1.5 stories. The Board of Appeals spends a great deal of time and effort granting variances to allow the basement of these dwellings to be considered a basement. This zoning amendment will largely cure the problem by allowing a basement to qualify if the finished floor height of the first floor is no more than 6 feet above mean grade, and that's an increase of 2 feet. The Planning Board recommends that you adopt this.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak to this motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the recommendation of the Warrant Committee say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. It's unanimous. Article 11. Now, Article 11, first of all, it's, the article is printed in your warrant. There was no recommendation at the time the warrant was printed. The recommendation was included in the pink handout from the other night. Beginning at the bottom of the 4th page, and the recommendation contains substantially similar but the more important verbiage that will be the motion before you. But as I understand it, there are some more changes to the recommendation. And if you'll allow me a moment, I want to make sure we get this straight. All right, folks, we have an interesting situation, but one that's can easily be solved. The other night, you probably all grabbed the pink sheets, yes? Subsequent to then, there are a couple of changes to the pink sheet that were reprinted on the green sheet, this one-page green sheet. I hope you all got that. And then, tonight, and by the way, the changes had to do with sections 3 and 9. Then there was another change, and it has to do with section 6 that's on a white sheet. And I understand there were 200 copies put up there. All right, I'm hearing we didn't get that. So here's what I'm going to do. First of all, you're going to have an Okay, fine. Mr. Cochran is handing them out right now. So while Mr. Cochran is handing it out, let me explain what I think is a reasonable approach here. You're going to have a full presentation on this motion. I could choose to read and start flipping between 3 pages, but I could confuse myself and probably you more. What I'd prefer to do is just to walk you through quickly once where the changes are from the green, from the pink to the green to the white. And then I'm going to, thank God for color, that's all I can say. Then I'm going to recognize the chairman of the planning board. I want you to all know that I've been informed by the planning board and the warrant committee that these subsequent changes have been accepted as friendly amendments. So always in front of you is the motion supported by the warrant committee. In this article, the motion supported by the warrant committee happens to be in three different sheets. So if you have your pink sheet, let me just give you the guidance I think you need to have a complete picture. Your pink sheets, beginning on the bottom of the 4th page, is the recommendation for the planned unit housing development, Article 11. If you follow that to the next page, there's a section 3. Is everyone with me on the pink sheet? That section 3 has one change in it, and that is on the 3rd line down, the number 375,000 has been changed to 370,000. The number, I'm sorry, you know what, I guess I get this microphone problem too, so I'll try to be careful of that. Section 3, the 3rd line down, the number 375,000 is changed to 370,000. That was completely reprinted on the green sheet, but that's the only change to that section. If you further follow along on the pink sheet, you go down 3, 4, 5, 6, you turn the page, 7, 8, and you come down to 9, affordable housing. In 9, the first sentence says, in a PUTD containing less than 10 townhouse units, an application may, and after the word may, there's a sentence added. And that's what's on the green sheet, and it's underlined. That sentence is, provide for one townhouse unit to be used for an attached townhouse suitably restricted so as to. Everything I just said is just an addition after the word may and before the word count in the second line in section 9. Then lastly, and I apologize because I just realized in order I went past it, but it's in a different sheet. Go back to section 6, which is the bottom of the previous page, page 5. I numbered my pages in this pink sheet. I wish they had been pre-numbered. Page 5, at the bottom there's a section called number of units. That has been replaced by this white sheet, number 6, number of units. And I believe that's the sheet that you should have received from Mr. Corcoran, who's passing them out. So folks, before you is a motion supported by the Warrant Committee and the Planning Board on the planned unit and the planned unit townhouse development. And at this point, that's the motion before the body. I pointed out where the verbiage was. I'll recognize the chairman of our planning board to explain the motion before you.
Alexander Whiteside, Chairman of the Planning Board. This zoning would establish a special permit procedure for development of townhouses on parcels of land with at least 370,000 square feet, with at least 400 feet of frontage on the street, abutting a multi-unit housing development of at least 40 units, and on which there exists a house with a pre-1925 dwelling. Although this zoning could apply to other parcels assembled to meet these requirements, it was specifically designed for the St. Pius Rectory parcel, and it reflects the result of intensive negotiations between the developer, abutters, residents of the Brush Hill neighborhood, and the planning board. The zoning was primarily intended to ensure a quality development meeting the requirements worked out in these negotiations. The changes, which you've been given, the first change is reducing the size of the parcel from 375,000 square feet to 370,000 square feet, so that the St. Pius parcel would in fact qualify without their having to go out and assemble an additional 1,400 square feet. The second amendment, this is on the green sheet, the change to number 9. It was simply some text was left out of the printed warrant, and this restores that text. The third change on the white sheet has to do with the maximum number of units per acre. And the zoning in the pink sheet provides that it is 4.5 units an acre. The zoning on the white sheet says 4 units an acre with a bonus of half a unit an acre if the historic structure on the site is preserved and if the setbacks from the front and side lot lines are more than required in the zoning, which is 60 feet from the front and 35 feet from the sides. So the change doesn't materially change what's currently in the zoning. Because this zoning was intended to permit development of the St. Pius Rectory site, I think it seems appropriate to let the lawyer for the proposed developer of that site run through what sort of a development he proposes, the developer proposes. The planning board recommends that this article be adopted. It believes that this will be a quality development and significantly better than what might occur if the zoning failed.
Thank you. Mr. Corcoran, you're recognized. Not only a lawyer for the development, but a town meeting member, or vice versa.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Ned Corcoran, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 3. I'm also a lawyer with an office in Quincy, and I'm pleased to be here on behalf of Northland Development, which has purchased the property at 865 Brush Hill Road in Milton and is represented by its president, Jack Dawley. apologize, I thought this was teed up a little better. But while that's warming up, let me at least give you an overview. Northland Residential is a Burlington-based developer that pursues high-end, high-quality residential development in eastern New England. It has done developments such as the redevelopment of the McLean Hospital in Belmont, Belmont's up and down the eastern Massachusetts, Maine, New Hampshire, and Rhode Island, and does so in a way that I think is pretty special. It engages in direct conversations with neighbors, abutters, and town officials, and develops site plans that are unique to the characteristics of the property in question and are unique to the issues and concerns that affect those who are most directly abutting. And they spent a significant amount of time and have engendered a significant amount of goodwill among direct and near abutters to the property. So I've got a series of photographs. I'll give you a basic overview of the property, and when it opens, we'll run through the photographs. For the overview, the St. Pius Rectory site is located on Brush Hill Road. It is between Curry College and the city of Boston. Do what? We'll try it another way.
Seems to be a good time. I wanted to share some remarks with you tonight. I forgot to mention them earlier while they're working on it. Looks like they're going to switch computers, get the same version of Windows. It probably come as no surprise to you folks, but I happen to be a fan of town meeting. And I have to tell you, last night I thought that town meeting was at one of its strongest points, where there were so many people engaged in some of the articles, really on the behalf of what was best for the town. Very good discussion, very good dialogue, and changes, sending one article back to be further studied, that show the power of town meeting. The only thing I guess I would remind you all too is that articles that are brought before you by various boards and committees in this town, I can assure you, although they may have flaws, that they're the result of a lot of hard work by a lot of dedicated people on their respective boards and committees. So it's great to challenge, look, this isn't ready for prime time. I don't think this is in the best interest of the town. We just try to be careful about the characterizations. I had a dilemma last night watching some of the dialogue. I was thinking of interrupting and saying, look, let's ratchet down some of the commentary, but at the same time, I thought it was all so well-intentioned for the good of the town, I let it go. But let's just try to be mindful of that in the future. There are a lot of good people who may see things slightly different that are working hard on behalf of the town in this room. You all ought to be proud of that. And let's try to make sure we don't shoot the messenger as we shoot that message. So thank you.
Looks like we're almost there, so thank you. Again, the property is located on Brush Hill Road between Curry College and the city of Boston. It is about 8.5 acres, and the reason for the First Amendment was my typographical error. I misread the site plan, and I miscalculated the number of minimum lot coverage. So with my request and the planning board's and the warrant committee's indulgence, agreed to change that number to reflect what is actually part of the property. It is property that was formerly owned by the Archdiocese of Boston and was operated by St. Pius Church as its rectory. And some of you remember that there was a carriage house where there was a preschool that was also operated on the site. Here we go. So this is the property. It is roughly bounded here along the backside of 2 parcels on Dana Avenue. The frontage is on Brush Hill Road, and it comes along the rear of properties that front on Cushing Road. The rear of the property is the Boston Housing Authority, a significant housing development just on the Boston side of the line. As I said, it's about 8.5 acres, 373,000 plus square feet. It's got 400 feet of frontage along Brush Hill Road, and it has a separate 25 feet of frontage along Cushing, because there's a little tail that comes out off the backside where the priests used to walk out and over the back door to the St. Pius Church. This is sort of a obscured presentation because this is Brush Hill Road, which is actually a straight line in front of the property. But this is the main entrance to the property. It's a beautiful stone wall. It extends a couple of 100 feet on each side. And today, it is substantially overgrown. It was a beautifully maintained property when it was originally developed, but now it is substantially overgrown and lots of brush and other invasive species. The property is essentially flat. There are no wetlands. This is a quick look at the site plan. This is, again, Brush Hill Road, City of Boston. 2 lots on Dana Avenue. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lots on the Cushing side. This is that little tail that comes out the other side. You can see how the main drive enters, comes around to a point where there's a beautiful old building. It was an estate built in approximately 1913. I'll show you a photograph of that in a minute. And then back here is the old carriage house. We show a series of what Jack likes to call character-defining trees. Beautiful old stately trees that ought to be saved as part of a site plan if that can be done, including a magnificent beach that's approximately here. So this is the original house. It is known as the Dupee house. It was built in 1913. Under our bylaw, it is considered historic and ought to be saved if it can. It has a colonial revival architectural style. The main house is defined here. It's about 5,800 square feet of living space on 3 floors. And then just here is a step back for the building, and this is a kitchen and then smaller what used to be servants' quarters. So a portion of the building, where did it go? Sort of a portion of the building that is capable of being removed and redeveloped if appropriate. The site plan that we've developed in conjunction with the neighborhood would provide for 36 age-targeted by design townhouse units. Now, what does that mean? These are units that are not restricted by deed to an over certain age population, but they're designed with my generation, many of our generation in mind, that they have first floor master bedrooms, 2-car garages, most of the living space on the first floor, a couple of smaller bedrooms on the second floor for older children who may be coming home from college, children with grandchildren, so that they have a place to come and stay, but they're not intended to be resided by families with children full-time. There are no amenities proposed for children. They're really for people who want to downsize, no longer shovel the driveway, mow the lawn, maybe in other places, different parts of the year, but want a high-value, high-end product in which to live and to remain in town. And there is no such product in town today. The program provides for, as I said, 36 townhouse units, generally in pods of 3 or 4 units to the pod, and the restoration of the main portion of this building into 2 townhouses. We provide for 4 affordable units. That's 11% affordability, but the requirement in the bylaw is 10. We preserve and restore the main entrance, and the property will have significant setbacks over and above what would normally be required in the town zoning. The bylaw provides for 60 feet of setback on the front yard and a minimum of 35 feet on the sides. We're actually proposing 70 feet setback and 45 feet, or 40 feet of setback. And so the friendly amendment that was presented would require us to try to achieve that in order to gain approval for 36 units as opposed to 32. It'd be 32 as of right, but this site plan, as developed, does show 36 and is our intent to achieve 36 units as the density for this site. A couple of interesting notes. We all received copies of letters from 2 direct abutters urging support of the town meeting for this bylaw. They came from Rick Franklin and Josie Hughes, his wife, who live here, and from Sarah Hamilton and her husband Paul, who live here. The setbacks take into account both a heightened or a greater setback along the property line, but also account for distances from nearest buildings. And so on the Dana Ave side, the nearest building to building is approximately 135 feet. From Sarah Hamilton's property, it's closer to 215 feet. And then there's a couple who lives here, and this distance is about 95 feet. So the setbacks are pretty significant and will be enhanced by a carefully planned open space and planting plan that will clean out deadwood, supplement what ought to remain with different types of planting that will provide visual screening on a year-round basis, but which can be maintained fairly easily. So this is the cleaned up version of the new site drive. This is the building that you see, just go back one, that's here. One of the requirements of the zoning and one of the concerns of the neighborhood as we were addressing the development was that the buildings ought to appear like they have a front door presence, even if they're actually turned sideways to the roadway. So this distance is about 145 feet. As I said, this is about 70 feet, 75 feet. And the design of the buildings is intended so that this actually looks like the front door. If you're driving along Brush Hill Road, it has the appearance of a front door and not the side of the house. And this is a closer of the same. The garage is around on the side as you would pull in and around the drive. And so you would come out, you'd enter what looks like to be your front door here. This is just another look at what it would look at with the garage and then from the side. So you'd come out of the garage, come in this way. And let me go back just a couple quickly. One of the other important things, the neighborhood gave us a list of about 15 criteria they asked us to pay attention to as we worked with them to site plan the property, all of which we think we were able to achieve. They came up with the term evolved estate, and we tried to pay very careful attention to that moniker as we design the site. But notice that the way the buildings are set, they're not set with a blank wall facing out to properties. They turn and they present angles, and the angles present less mass. They're intended to look like they're further away than perhaps they are, although the distance is quite significant, but they are intended to weave their way rather than simply present a mass of wall if you were looking at them from an abutter's property. So when we get to the issue of the Dupuy house, the existing house, the initial concern was it hasn't been lived in quite a while. It's become the subject of target practice from neighbors on the other side of the town line, and it's really, as you can see, it's pretty beat up. We went through it with the architect at the encouragement of the Historical Commission, which was very concerned that we attempt to save the property. And it turns out that the bones of the property, the bones of the building are really solid. The sill, the main structural support is solid, and it is easily capable of being redeveloped into side-by-side townhouses. So the plan is to remove this wing, which is has less utility. It's chopped up. It's difficult to think about redeveloping. And put a garage off of this end that would sort of match as much as possible. There's an interesting portico off this side, and sort of give it some balance. And then 2 units, either one over the other or side by side in this building. And we've spent several meetings with the Historical Commission, sort of walking through that in terms of how we could arrive at that redevelopment. So, fiscal impact. This is a comparison of what you could do if we did a subdivision as a by right form of zoning or these townhouses. We think we could get 8 units under the Residence A zoning, 40,000 square feet with 150 feet of frontage. Assessed value of each home would probably be in the area of $1.2 million. Total assessment, assessed value of $9.6. At $14.99 a thousand, you get a total amount of tax revenue of $143,000. We think that in 8 homes, there's likely to be somewhere in the area of 12 school children. The impact per child is $12,816. The total cost of the town to educate those children, $153,000. Net tax revenue to the town is a loss, a reduction of about almost $10,000. On the flip side, with 32 market rate units, each assessed at approximately $850,000, we arrive at a total assessed value of about $27 million. And at $14.99 a thousand, we get tax revenue of $407,000. Maybe you have a handful of children finishing high school, and so maybe there's 4 children, and the cost per student being the same, $51,000 to educate those 4 children. Net tax revenue, $356,000, and a delta between this number and this number of $366,000. We think low impact, high value return to the town associated with this development. So, I know at the warrant committee there was some significant discussion about the notion of how much affordable is appropriate. And I want to present some general numbers on the cost associated with that. The sale price of an affordable unit based on 80% of median income, current interest rates, tax rates, and whatnot. You back into a sale price which we think is $172,000. The cost to develop each unit as an all-in number, that's a combination of the cost to buy the land, to build each unit, it's about $250,000 to build each unit. The cost to install the road and other infrastructure, soft costs associated with all of the planning process, the design, permitting, etc. The total cost per unit is $398,000. We arrive at a net loss to the developer of $226,000 per unit. At the current rate of 4 units, it's $904,000, close to $1 million. That's without subsidy. There is no subsidy available for this level of affordability under this bylaw. That's a cost of business that developers understand. It's fairly consistent with, it is very consistent with affordability counts on all of the other zoning that we've enacted within the last 5 to 8 years. And it's very consistent with similar developments in other communities that Jack has worked in. The cost to add an additional unit, and there was some interest expressed at the warrant committee in perhaps doing that, raises that notion to $1,013,000 and pushes it over a point where this developer can make that work. So we think that the unit count, one last slide please. The unit count with the affordability component works for the town's perspective, from the developer's perspective, and the neighborhood's perspective. The goal here is obviously to maximize the return and minimize the risk to Jack. At the same time, to minimize density to the extent we can to protect the neighborhood and preserve open space and other buffers. And to maximize inclusionary opportunities by providing affordable units, understanding that there is no subsidy available with respect to the provision of those units. As I said, it's consistent with other towns, it's consistent with our zoning, and I would urge the body to vote to accept what has been recommended as an appropriate allocation among the various components and urge the body to adopt this zoning bylaw as it's been presented. Thank you for your time. I'm happy to answer questions as they may arise and look forward to the debate. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak to this motion? I'll remind you it's a 2/3 vote. Excuse me, miss, are you rising to be recognized? Yes, ma'am, you're recognized.
Thank you very much. I'm Ellen Denoyer, town meeting member, Precinct 2. I think this is a very attractive project. I think there's been an admirable process of working with the neighbors. But I would urge that we defeat this article because I feel like it is not really overall in the interest of the town. It's clearly intended to serve one site, but I think there are many sites in town where we should be looking at historic properties, large parcels that could be subdivided, and we should have a process to really address those other sites as well. So I think this really serves one site. Clearly, there's only one site in town that it applies to, and I think it's for the benefit of this developer, and I think it's certainly an attractive project, but I don't think in principle this is a good way to do zoning. I don't think it's in the interest of the town. I think the town needs to address other parcels. I think the town needs this kind of housing on other parcels, and I would suggest that we defeat this article and have a proper planning process. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Earl Fay, Precinct 1. As written, I would not support this article. I do believe it needs at least one more additional housing unit. We have not gone as far as we ought to as a town in terms of affordable units. We had an opportunity last town meeting. We came real close, I think, to changing the article by just a couple percentage points. That's what I would recommend again tonight, is that we raise it 2 points to bring it to a 13%, would bring us to that 5th unit. I'm only asking for 1 unit. That's our responsibility. The Commonwealth is there's such a shortage. And who built this town? When you think of our parents and grandparents, you know, they were the blue-collar folks. We're talking about middle-class people who deserve to live in town. Many of us are going to go to the polls next week and vote for folks who we believe support those middle-class people. And yet we need to do that here and now ourselves. This is our opportunity. I believe the property has been purchased already, so the purchase price analysis isn't terribly relevant at this point, if I understand that correctly. So we've already bought the property. So I think we could tweak those numbers, and the developer will not back away. I am quite convinced that he will not walk away from the proposal, and we ought to bring this up 2 percentage points. If that needs to be a amendment, and it's a simple, I don't think I need to write it out. It's a
You may need to. You won't if it's a simple word, but
it's a simple.
Well, let's find where. Do you know where it was located?
Sure, it would be on the green sheet,
Green sheet. Thank you.
section 9.
Here is my green sheet.
On the bottom, it would be striking the 10% number and raising it to 13. If I'm not mistaken, that would raise it to a 5th affordable unit.
Okay, and you will not need to write that.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
That's so you're basically you're making a motion to amend the motion before the body to change paragraph 9, the 3rd line or the 2nd line from the end, the 10% to 12%. Is that correct, sir?
No, to 13.
13, excuse me.
That's okay.
Okay, so that's a motion to amend. It's been made. Has it been seconded? It's been made and seconded. Okay, so folks, what we have before us now is a motion to amend the 10% to 13%. Does anyone wish to speak to that motion? Yes, sir, you're recognized.
Tom Callahan, Precinct 4. I would support that amendment. However, I don't think it achieves what the author hopes, because by my math, 32 times 13% is 4.16. It's 36. You include the affordable units? Okay, so 36 times, can somebody do that math?
I'm doing it right now.
It's 4.6. Okay, so it does achieve. Okay,
It
sorry.
does.
We can make it 14 if we want to make sure we don't.
But
So
easy.
just to get the math correct, this is a question. It's 36 times 13. under the-
36 times 13% is 4.68.
Okay.
I-
So-
presumably you wouldn't build a 0.68 property, so
Right, you round up.
yeah, it rounds up.
Round up. So I would support the amendment, and I would point out that I think we have a model very close to us. The city of Boston has probably the best inclusionary zoning program in the Commonwealth. It is 13%, exactly. And I would also point out, although this is not speaking specifically to this amendment, that their cash-out provision is significant, and it's very similar to the math that Ned Corcoran just presented. Their cash-out provision is approximately $200,000 per unit, and I would encourage in future instances the town to look at cash-out provisions that are in that range. I think the developer's math proved that that should be an equivalent amount of cash to replace an affordable unit, but I would support this amendment to 13%.
Thank you. Sir, do you wish to speak to the motion to amend?
Yes.
Yes, sir, you're recognized.
Yes, my name is Emmett Schmarzo. I'm a town meeting member, Precinct 10. At the town meeting in May, I had proposed that we make adjustments so that way we can have increased amounts of properties that are considered affordable. I, for one, think that we as a town meeting should be looking at what we can do to make sure that the town meets the requirements of the Massachusetts law specifying that we have at least 10% of the properties in this town be affordable. We're not there yet. And we did not take what I consider, we came very close at the last town meeting to ensuring that we would, in fact, get some increased housing. And I think this is an appropriate motion, which I strongly support, to make sure that we do what we think we're supposed to do. And this is a good opportunity, and I'm quite certain that the developer would not want to walk away from what is otherwise, I think, an exceptional property. I had a second point, and it's not really related to this, but I want to point about raise an issue about having universal housing, universal design, so that way when you get into a house, I presume that the doors. Yeah.
So I need to make sure that we're not confused.
Okay.
You may come back to speak to the main motion when we're back there,
Okay.
but if you could just keep your remarks
I
to
will
the...
keep, okay, I'm simply suggest universal design, but let me stick to the point, and that is this is a perfect opportunity that we passed up last time at town meeting, and I fail to see why we should not take advantage of it this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Stone, you're recognized.
Thank you. Jeff Stone, Precinct 1, and I rise to support this proposed amendment for the reasons that my neighbor Earl Fay has outlined. This is a high-end proposal, as Mr. Corcoran said. That's fine. But as others have said, we really do need more affordable units across this state, and I think we know we need more in this town. And we've been grappling and struggling with how to do that. So this represents, I think, the first offer, so to speak, of the developer. And I think we can try a little harder with them. They can try a little harder and stretch and have one additional affordable unit in this development. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Whiteside, you're recognized.
Alexander Whiteside, Chairman of the Planning Board. What we want to do in doing zoning like this is to attract developers to use the zoning. And as you can see, by pushing up the percentage to 13%, it's going to cost this particular developer $200,000 or so. The zoning will be less attractive if we use this as a model in creating other zoning and saying 13% across the board. The zoning that we create will be less attractive for use by developers. A 40B development requires 25% affordable and basically allows a developer to double the density. The more you push up the affordability factor in the conventional zoning, the less desirable it becomes, and the more likely you will end up with a development under 40B. When we provided 10%, we looked at all the other zoning provisions in town requiring affordability. They're all 10%. The state requires 10%. The town is 500 units short of having 10%, but this one unit would not make an appreciable dent in that. I think that we want this sort of zoning to be an inducement for developers. We want it to be a good alternative to 40B development. The more you push up the affordable factor beyond 10%, the less of an inducement it will be. So the planning board recommends you stick with what's in the zoning. 10% is a good number and will produce 4 affordable units, and they're going to be badly needed and probably much appreciated.
Thank you. Sir, do you wish to be recognized? You're recognized.
Yes, thank you. Tim Kernan, Precinct 10, and also president of the Brush Hill Area Neighborhood Association. We've worked diligently with this developer to come up with a plan that satisfies all the neighbors, and we looked at the impact on the neighborhood beyond that. We considered the fact that this model could be replicated in other sections of town or up and down Brush Hill Road. Now is not the time to dictate the economics of how this deal is structured to a developer. We have worked with him, he has worked with us diligently to address the various issues of the neighborhood. I just don't think now is the time to twist his arm and say, do something different, change your economics. That should have been done a long time ago. It should have been done possibly at discussions we would have had early on. And maybe the message to the neighborhood association is, next time a development of this nature comes along, yes, perhaps we need to look at 13%, and we will. Now, I don't think it's the time to do it. We've got a lot at stake at these discussions, and would love to see this go forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Corcoran, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. And again, Ned Corcoran, Precinct 3, and I'm here on behalf of Northland Residential. I would urge a no vote on this proposal. It's a number that's coming out of thin air without empirical data to support it, because we want to feel better about providing additional affordable units. The Planning Board has established a subcommittee to look at condominium development more broadly. I'm a member. Marion McKettrick's a member. John Cronin's a member. Other members of this body are members. That is the place to look at things like broader application of this zoning to other particular parcels, if appropriate, and how and under what circumstances to increase the affordable unit calculations that go into this zoning. There's got to be some empirical analysis done to establish why simply ratcheting it up the risk to a developer is appropriate, because we want to feel better. Nothing has come before the Planning Board through the hearing process, the Warrant Committee through its hearing process, and I think we ought to stand where we are because it puts this development at risk. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir, you're recognized.
Tom Callahan, Precinct 4. Move this development several hundred feet to, I'm not sure the direction, west or north. It's in Hyde Park. It has to be 13%. We have, I don't know specifically what the evidence the developer would need, but as I stated before, the City of Boston requires 13%. That policy has been in place since the year 2000, has worked really well to produce lots of units. Ironically, if this development were in Hyde Park, we'd be getting 5 units of affordable housing.
Thank you. Yes, sir, you're recognized.
Jim Henderson, town meeting member, Precinct 5. Ned, you put some numbers up there as to the cost per unit. And was it, could I get back to that slide? No, the next one. So you have cost to develop of each unit $398,000. You're showing a selling price of each unit at 1.2. So $850. Okay, so you have $850 of $450,000 profit on 31 units, which would be what, 13 million? So a $200,000 additional hit in relation to a $13 million profit, I don't think it's such a significant number. He said this is a fully loaded cost, $398. So if he's pinching pennies and there's not enough profit in there and the $200,000 makes a big difference, $200,000 on 13 million, my opinion, doesn't make a big difference. I would suggest 5 units.
Thank you. Mr. Corcoran, if you'll wait, and just for the education of everybody here, I see another member waiting to speak, and our new bylaw says that if someone would be recognized twice while there's somebody waiting to speak, sir, you're recognized.
Henry Carr, Precinct 10. One of the reasons why people like to live in Milton is because this is not Hyde Park.
I see no one else waiting. Mr. Corcoran, you're recognized.
Just Ned Corcoran again, Precinct 3. If you move this a couple hundred feet to the west, the cost structure goes way down. The cost of land in Hyde Park is significantly different than the cost of land in Milton. The cost of developing in Hyde Park is different than the cost of developing in Milton. This is a new product. This is a high-risk issue. And the numbers, you know, that's the cost per affordable unit. The hope is 850 return. There's a risk out there on the return. Suggesting is, without true empirical analysis that ought to be done in a thoughtful way by the planning board, the warrant committee, and others, that this is a number that is consistent with our town bylaws, and it is not an arbitrary and capricious change to that number that hasn't been carefully considered and carefully thought out. I would urge the body to vote no on this amendment.
Thank you. Mr. Hiss, you're recognized.
Hi, Bob Hiss, Precinct 3. As I think about this, I think there's two reasons I'd argue for defeating the amendment. The first is, you know, there's two ways the developers can come to us and help us to achieve affordable housing. I mean, they can come and cooperate in some way, like this developer has, or they could bypass it, take the 40B route, and in effect jam it past the zoning laws and jam it down our throats. And we've had lots of press recently over developers that are choosing that route, and the town rises up against it. There's a lot of angst, there's a lot of noise. So here we have a developer that's saying, I'm willing to come and provide 11%. And as y'all do the math, if ultimately every development has more than 10, we'll eat up those 500 units that Mr. Whiteside talked about, and we'll hit the 10%, and we're all good. So on the one hand, I'd like to reward a developer that's coming to us and playing ball within the zoning laws. The second is, I don't know the economics of this deal, and it really hasn't been presented fully, so I could. But let's say the developer balks, and they own the property, as someone said. I mean, at worst case, we're 200 to 300,000 in the black in additional property tax each year. Let's say we get into a protracted Central Avenue discussion with a developer for 10 years. I mean, that's $2 million, $3 million in property taxes we're leaving on the table because we're trying to eke out another affordable housing unit. So in the sum total of saying we've got a developer who's playing ball, we go 11%, which advances our goal, and we take something that's off the tax rolls today and put it on the tax rolls today and reap the benefits for years, I'd say defeat the amendment and support the originally written warrant. Thanks.
Okay, folks. Did you wish to be recognized? You're recognized. Actually, so this town meeting member we recognized, make his point. I'll look for the position of the warrant committee. We'll move to a vote. Sir, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'd just like to stress that this is not an arbitrary number. It's a number consistent with other communities, such as been pointed out. It nudges us in the right direction. The fact that we might have been in a 10% in the past, to me, it's time to nudge us forward, to be a little more progressive and provide a little more affordability and diversity of our neighbors. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hayes, do we have the position of the warrant committee at this point? No, not yet. We're working on it? Okay, fair enough. So while they're doing that, and the warrant committee has to weigh in on their on the motion before you, when we hear the warrant committee's position, I'll take a vote. Unlike the article itself, which is a zoning bylaw and will require a 2/3 vote, the motion to amend is a simple majority. And again, for clarity, while they're doing it, the motion to amend before you has to do with Section 9, the second to last line, changing 10% to 13%. Oh, Ms. Conlon, you Chairman of the Board of Selectmen, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The Board of Selectmen supports the recommendation of the Warrant Committee and the Planning Board. And we want to address just a couple of issues here. We're very understanding and sensitive to the comments about affordable housing. together, we and the planning board are really trying to make a big emphasis on moving the town forward in the area of affordable housing. Just this afternoon, the State Department of Housing and Community Development approved the housing production plan that we submitted last month. So we have that approved, and we're going to be working towards fulfilling the goals that are set forth in that plan. The Board of Selectmen has already voted to submit an article at the May town meeting for an appropriation to the Affordable Housing Trust. That trust was authorized a few years ago by town meeting. We created the trust, appointed trustees last year. It has no funding at this time, and that's something that we're going to be looking for in terms of developments, in terms of donations, in terms of various ways to fund that. The housing production plan does identify some different means, but we are planning on seeking an appropriation, probably a very substantial appropriation, will be our request to the warrant committee. We're going to ask the planning board to co-sponsor it with us, and we're hoping that by using some one-time money, we will get the housing trust off to a good start. So affordable housing is very important to both boards. We're trying to put a lot of energy and focus on this, and we understand the issues that have been raised by numerous speakers tonight. But we are at risk of losing a potential development here that the warrant committee, the planning board, the neighborhood association, and many people have weighed in and are supportive. It's a good design, it's a good builder. We're trying to attract good builders and developers to Milton, and I think we should not support the amendment, but we should support the original recommendation of the warrant committee. So we urge a no vote on the amendment.
Thank you. Mr. Hayes, Chairman of the Warrant Committee, you're recognized for purposes of informing the body of the position of the Warrant Committee on the motion to amend.
Thank you. Ted Hayes, your Warrant Committee Chair. The Warrant Committee does not support this amendment. And I just want to point out that the math we're talking about fails to recognize the lost sale, so that it would be more about 900,000 swing for the developer. And that kind of swing would come at a cost. If you were doing it initially, it would come at a cost of density or setback or something like that. So the Warrant Committee doesn't think this is the right time for this kind of amendment, though we do support the idea of increasing the percentage of available affordable housing in Milton through greater efforts by the town. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, folks, all those in favor of the motion to amend to 13% say aye. Aye. Opposed, no? No. The motion to amend is defeated. We are now back to the main motion before the body. Does anyone wish to speak to that motion? Yes, sir, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Earl Fay, Precinct 1. I would ask that we defeat the article as written. We have just lost an opportunity. We say we're committed, I've heard that before, to this idea of affordable housing. So let's put it back in the developer's hands to come up and make the numbers actually work, revisit it if it need be, to come back. But I urge it to be defeated. I've heard some background conversation about, well, this isn't Hyde Park, we've done it differently before, but I don't know of any townhouse development units in Milton either. So this is certainly something new, and let's do something else new, which is add some affordability. So until that actually happens, I would highly recommend that we defeat the measure. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am, you're recognized.
Cheryl Tugayas, Precinct 9. Let's be clear, this zoning is written for this particular developer for this particular site. This is the way Milton has been doing zoning for multifamily housing on our larger sites. Is this the best way to do it? I think some people think not. I think that the master plan, I've worked on the master plan committee the last 2.5 years. I've been to most of the forums and I've heard a lot of input. People would like to see us be more proactive with our zoning rather than reactive, rather than reacting to a particular developer on a particular site. But is tonight the right time to do that? This is something I've discussed with a number of other town meeting members, and I've come to think that no, tonight is not the right night to do it. So I would suggest a yes vote on this article, but a strong suggestion that the planning board work towards the goals and ideas that are incorporated into the master plan so that we can be more proactive with our zoning and that we can look at the appropriate way to get a diversity in the type of housing that we have in Milton. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak to this motion? Mr. Jackson, you're recognized.
Peter Jackson, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 2. I'm a little confused about one of the amendments that we went through this morning. It has to do with the density going from 4.5 to 4 units. And it says basically that if he can't save the house and redevelop the house, that he won't get his density bonus. It seems to me that this whole development was sold on the notion of preserving the house. So I think, and certainly by now they've had a chance, and they said that they've looked very closely at the house. So, and one of the major purposes of this article is to preserve the historic house. So I think we need a commitment that that house will be preserved and not that they have the opportunity to demolish the house at the cost of the density bonus. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Corcoran, you're recognized for the purpose of addressing the question.
Thank you. Yes, Ned Corcoran again, Precinct 3. I'm happy to make that commitment. The full intent is to earn the right to build all 36 units. And the commitment is there that we will do that unless, you know, something unforeseen occurs.
Thank you. Yes, sir, you're recognized.
Brian Furs, Planning Board Member, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 10. I have been very torn about this article since it came to Planning Board. I ultimately voted in favor of it at the Planning Board level, and I am ultimately going to vote in favor of it tonight. But there's a few things I want to just mention before I do that. And the reason I'm troubled by it is just to second what Cheryl Tagayas came up here to say. I'm continually troubled by the propensity of our town to zone on a reactive basis, right zoning on behalf of specific projects. There was an effort made to try to make this more general bylaw, and that was, we decided as a board that we needed to put some good thought into that and put it into a committee, which hopefully will be coming back to this forum in May or October with a condominium bylaw to consider on a general basis. Hopefully that will actually encourage the kind of development that Mr. Whiteside spoke to. You'll have a good bylaw that will encourage the kind of project that Milton and its residents want, and that a developer can underwrite and design, and it will work for both sides. But I encourage this body to participate in that process. The Condo Association Bylaw Forum Committee, however, whatever you want to call it, will be a public hearing process. I encourage people with ideas on affordable housing to attend those meetings and give your input. I encourage people with design ideas to come to the meetings and give your input. Please participate in the process, because I would like to participate in a town meeting in the future where we don't have to debate affordable housing and the percentage we should be using on every single project. I'd like there to be able to be a consensus across the town so that we can get good projects done. We can get them done efficiently. Developers can come in with some expectation that they can build something that's going to work, that's going to make the people in our town happy, and that ultimately we'll have a much more efficient project, and hopefully we can be in and out of this forum a lot more quickly in the future. So I do encourage you to vote in favor of this project. I think it's a very, very good project, but I do strongly recommend that you participate in a good process to come up with a more general bylaw in the future. And I encourage us all to really think about how we've been doing this zoning and whether it's the right way to do it in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Jackson, I see you sitting there. Are you following up to the question you proposed? If you are, I prefer you do that now. You're recognized.
Peter Jackson, Precinct 2. Since the developer has committed to keeping the historic house, I think I'd like to propose an amendment to Section 6, which eliminates the number 1, that the historic structure shall be converted and preserved, because that's already a given, or the development goes forward. So I think we should just say, in the event that building setbacks shall exceed 60 feet from the front line, and eliminate the whole of number 1 and the number of number 2. So
All
read,
right, so Mr. Jackson, okay, so we'll now read, for those that are following along, refer to your white sheet. It's section 6, the revision. So it would now read the third line, by 1/2 unit per acre, in the event that building setbacks shall exceed 60 feet. Is that? Okay. So, Mr. Jackson, I'm not
Yes.
sure what's going on, but
yes,
I'm trying to
that's
get
what I was
clarity here.
proposing. But I'm confused because apparently there's another section of this that allow them to demolish the building, which I hadn't seen before.
Well,
So I'd like to-
perhaps you investigate that. Are you going to, so there's no motion before the body at this point? Yes or no? I mean, you want to
Yes.
go back and check and wait for no other town meeting
Yes,
member, I'll
yeah, I do
recognize
wanna
you to come
check
back.
the other-
Thank you. Mrs. Jeffries, you're recognized.
When I first, Marjorie Jeffries, Precinct 5. When I first came to this town, I heard in 1953, I heard that there was a lack of suitable housing for the people of this town, that there was only one kind of housing. Either it was residential with that kind of zoning, or it was a business. And I've been hearing, I like the idea of having a committee set up a general bylaw, but I was impressed with how this developer has catered to the whims and the needs of the residents who live around it. So because there is very little housing for those who wish to downsize their house, we need to have this kind of zoning because not everybody is elderly, and even my son would like to downsize his house. But there isn't, there is very little housing for those who can afford it to be able to have a less of a house. So I think we ought to vote for this and then hope that there is a committee that will bring in a general bylaw later on.
Thank you, Mr. Jeffries. Mr. McGetrick, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Joe McKettrick, Precinct 1, and I know the time is short, but I urge the body to approve this project. I've been very concerned about this particular piece of land because of the difficulty of developing it correctly. And I think that this developer has done a good job in trying to reconcile the interests of the neighbors with the need for the proposal. They have made a commitment to renovate that building, which is of historical interest. And I just can't leave without putting in a word of defense for Hyde Park. I lived in Hyde Park. I lived in the Fairmount Housing Project for 7 years. And from that perspective, I think they've done an excellent job with this. My fear was that we would wind up with some kind of an overloaded proposal under 40B and that it would be a real mess. I think this developer should be perceived as coming to our rescue. So I urge a yes vote on the main motion when we get to it.
Thank you.
But you came over here with us, Joe. You came over here with us.
Does anyone else wish to speak to this motion? Remind you it's a 2/3 vote. All those in favor of the recommendation of the Warrant Committee say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. I declare a 2/3 vote. Folks, we have a few articles left, but I have agreed to accommodate the schedule of a group that wants to make a quick update to you. So I'd like to entertain a motion to consider Article 14 next, which you will find on page 34. It's really important to accommodate schedule that's been difficult to do. Can I have a motion to consider Article 14? It's been moved and seconded. Seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? No? It's unanimous. Thank you. Mr. Morash, I'll recognize you. And as you're walking down, let me read the recommendation for Article 14, which you'll find on page 34. It is recommended, at the bottom of page 34, it's recommended the town vote to authorize its boards, commissions, and committees, including, without limitation, the Board of Selectmen and the Fire Department to apply for state and/or federal funds to assist and/or reimburse the town in connection with purposes of this article, to authorize the Board of Selectmen to accept grants, gifts, or donations on behalf of the town for the purposes of this article, and to authorize the Board of Selectmen with input from the Fire Space Needs Committee to determine within the scope of any restriction applicable to such grant, gift, or donation, the expenditure of any funds so raised for further study of the potential renovation, reconstruction, and/or construction of the fire station facilities in the town of Milton, including, without limitation, the following: retention of an architectural firm and/or other consultants and professionals to refine and expand upon the initial findings of the Fire Space Needs Committee, including the development of plans and cost estimates for implementation of proposed work. Review of existing documentation and existing conditions at 3 fire stations. Analysis of proposed sites for their suitability to accommodate fire stations that will meet anticipated needs. Functional and space needs program for each station based on committee and fire department input and current industry standards and best practices. Comparison of the relative advantages, disadvantages, and costs of renovation additions versus new construction for each station. Concept plans, narrative descriptions, inclusive of site work and MEP systems, and outline specifications sufficient to establish a scope, level of quality, and cost for each station. Design and construction, schedule for the 3 stations, construction and total project cost estimates, conduct public meetings to share preliminary findings, and further that the town vote no appropriation under this article. Mr. Morash, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Steve Morash, Precinct 2, and Chairman of your Fire Space Needs Committee. We wanted to give you an update of where this process is. We've been working since our committee since the spring, the annual town meeting, and we've done a couple of things. First, let me say that this recommendation from the Warrant Committee will have no appropriation, which means that we will still be on budget and at a 0 funding. We appreciate that. We also want to thank the Warrant Committee for the support that they've shown us when we met with them back earlier in this cycle, and some things we've done since May. One, we did ask that one of the things that needed to be done was to have someone look at what we came up with our recommendations to this body with our report, and that was to hire a consultant that built fire stations to figure out, were we on money? What exactly is this thing going to cost? How big is this bread box going to be for these firehouses? So since the May meeting, we met with the town moderator to determine what the next steps of our committee were. He would not discharge us, so I guess we're still held captive. And we met with the Board of Selectmen at a Board of Selectmen's meeting and the town administrator to, again, go over what our report said and listen to what they had to say. And one of the recommendations that they made was that we continue this process, but to, at some point, have public meetings about the report with people in the neighborhoods. We think that's a great suggestion, and we strongly support that. We wanted to understand what we're trying to do, and we issued an RFI to about 8 companies that, a response for information from 8 firms that built fire stations in Massachusetts. And that request for information, that RFI, basically reflected what you see in your warrant tonight as an article if passed. We think we just need to have someone take a look at what the next step of this may be. When we met with the Warrant Committee, and again, they were very supportive, but we did not know this. I know I did not know this. at the time that there was no money in the budget process at this point in time, because we give all the money away basically in the annual town meeting. And they were very nice and encouraged to go look for more money someplace else. We did receive 7 responses of the 8 companies we looked at that we asked to respond to us. Those cost estimates for developing an RFP to bring a consultant on to help us with this project ranged anywhere from approximately $34,000 to $100,000. We proposed this article for town meeting, and again, we met with the warrant committee. We were asked to go look for some more funding, and we accepted that. And I'm here to say that I'm going to ask Mr. Martin, if I may, ask Chief Grant to come up.
Absolutely.
And explain where we found the money to do this without coming back to the town budget. Chief Grant?
While Chief Grant is approaching the front of the room, I must tell you the casual reference by Mr. Morash that he came to see the moderator. They engaged me a few times. This committee is working very hard on your behalf. Chief Grant, you're recognized.
Good evening. It turns out we actually had the money all along. A couple of years ago, we were left 1/5 of an estate from Linnea Mellon. She's a woman who grew up, or I shouldn't say grew up, I grew up at the time. She lived on the corner of Spruce Street and Lyman Road. As far back as I can remember, she was widowed. I can remember trick-or-treating at the house, and she was always by herself. She was surrounded by 7 firefighter families, and they took care of her, and whatever her needs were that she needed an extra hand. And she was kind enough to remember us when she passed away. And that money was sitting there, and we've actually had discussion with the warrant committee. I don't know whether it was last year or the year before, but can I use that for basic things? And we felt that the premise of that was to do something that was memorable and beyond the scope of our year-to-year and day-to-day needs. So it's kind of sitting there and really in the back of my head, I guess, is the right way to put it. And I really can't think of anything that to me would be more appropriate than to have this money be spent to move this project forward and honor her memory for years to come. So that's where it came from.
Thank you.
The rest of the committee knew nothing about this nice lady who left the town's fire department this money at the time. And as Chief said, he forgot about it, but when he called me up that night, I said, God love your memory, Jack. There are some things that we are moving forward here with the work of this committee, that I just wanted to make sure we're all understood. And we urge you to vote yes on this article. This is not a fire building committee. It's a fire space needs committee. We have no authorization to start putting together construction documents. It's way too preliminary to that. We haven't met with any of the residents. We haven't presented to anyone except here at town meeting, and we know that's a step that must be taken to make this understood by the town. We'd like to, voting yes for this will again just allow us to continue our work and try to figure out what this project actually becomes and what we will allow it to become as a town meeting and as a town. What does the fire department look like 50 years from now, when most of us will not be probably in Milton? Or maybe some of us will be here, but probably up on Milton Cemetery. But these fire stations, these firehouses are here for a long time. And it's unlike any other building project that we've probably gone through. It's not like the school department building project. It's not like the library. It's something that's going to be a little different. And we just need to have someone come in that has done this and look at what the schedule might be for doing this. Under the best of circumstances, we would not be coming back to town meeting with preliminary concepts, with sketches, with some kind of idea of what cost this might entail. probably until spring of 2016 at the earliest. And I'm pretty much an optimist, but I think that's true. There was two issues that we talked about other than coming up with a consultant to help us with this project. One was the emergency repairs necessary to keep these firehouses operating safely for our firefighters. That's still up there. I'm not sure how we get around that. I know it's an issue that the selectmen and the warrant committee are going to have to deal with, but that's a very real issue for these firehouses. The other issue we talked about was the issue of fire-based EMS, and that's something that the chief brought to the committee. And we don't need a decision to move forward with this. That's another decision that needs a lot of study by this town about the pros and the cons, talking with the selectmen. There are issues about staffing and retirement and all those kind of issues, what the state's going to reimburse, if they reimburse anything. That will all go into making this town have that final decision. But for this committee to determine what a fire station might look like and how big that box might be, if the one station we think should have that capability, it's just a matter of coming up with two schemes, one with and one without a bay and 2 more bedrooms up on the second floor. And the town, whatever the decision the town makes, this committee is more than happy to support. We will hold public meetings with residents. We will encourage town residents to visit their fire stations. We ask you as town meeting members, Saturday's a nice day. Sunday, I mean, they are there all the time. They are your fire stations. These are your firehouses. Please, we urge you to take a look at our report and go visit them.
Mr. Morash, if I could interrupt you. Chief, is that an actual open invitation that unplanned town meeting members can stop by and visit the fire stations to inspect them or examine them?
The fire stations are open 24 hours a day. You feel free to stop by anytime you want. I do know this was kind of talked about that it might be, and we talked about Saturday. This coming Saturday is the day after Halloween, so that may not work all that well. But just looking at my calendar, if we wanted to, let's see, the following Saturday, I believe, is November 7th. So if you want to consider that a formal invitation, like I say, if you're not available, feel free to stop by anytime. Any of our people will show you around the 8th. Thank you. Eye doctor next, I guess, huh? But yeah, so on the 8th, feel free. I'll plan on being there, say, from 9 o'clock on, and if you want to come by and see what we're dealing with, feel free. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I've already reached out to members of the Master Planning Committee to sit down with them. We're going to be talking with Emily. We're going to talk to her on Monday of this week. I've already had initial discussions with the Government Study Committee. Whenever they're ready for us, we'd love to sit down and brief you with what this plan looks like and what we thought moving forward. And we're always willing to sit down with the Capital Committee. So we want to, again, as we said, be inclusive, be transparent. And again, to remember, this is not a construction documents we're looking at. These are not plans or budgets. This, as I said earlier, it's the Fire Space Needs Committee. With this work, if approved, we will still come in at 0 funding for the town. And again, we have to keep our eye on what we're trying to do, and that is to make these firehouses safe for our firefighters for the next, well, if history repeats itself, the next 100 years. We urge a yes vote on this, and we appreciate the support that we've seen here at town, throughout the town for this project so far. Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator.
Mr. Morash, even with my interruption, it was 9 minutes and 26 seconds. You kept it at 10.
Bruins are ahead 3-2.
Bruins ahead 3. Okay, so anyone else wish to speak to this motion? Yes, ma'am, you're recognized.
Deborah Felton, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 2, and also the Executive Director of Fuller Village. So when you're thinking about the fire space needs, I really encourage you to have talk about housing an ambulance, whether it be Fallon Ambulance or whether that be incorporated into the fire department, because right now it is a little distance from where the ambulance is parked to Fuller Village, and it is something that does concern our residents. I do want to thank the fire department. If they're not at the firehouse, when you go visit them on Atherton, they're probably at Fuller Village. And I know on behalf of my 400 residents, we want to thank the fire department for their great service. Thank you.
Mr. Gaius, you're recognized.
Cheryl Tagayas, Precinct 9. I'd like to support this article, but I'd also like to add an amendment or suggest an amendment that would address the concern that I raised at the annual town meeting in the spring, which is to encourage the preservation of the historic fire stations. So I have a written amendment. Should I read it or should I give it to you, Brian?
Well, why don't you read it first?
Okay.
Thank you.
So it would be to add a bullet point that would say the following.
And
Reconsider.
I apologize for interrupting, but do you know where you want to add it, Mrs. Gaius?
It could be at the end of the list of bullet points.
Okay.
So the text would be, reconsider the committee's recommendation to demolish historic fire stations and the former East Milton Library, and consider repurposing the buildings for other municipal or private use should they be found unsuitable for the fire department.
Okay, so that's a motion to amend. It's been made. Has it been seconded? It's been made and seconded. Thank you. I'll take that. Does anyone wish to speak now to the motion to amend, which is what's before the water? Thank you, Steve. I will. And Mrs. Tagayas, thank you for using the new form. I know your clerk will appreciate it. So at the very end, we're talking about Article 14, which had a list of bullet points before the words, "in further that the town vote no appropriation on this article." Mr. Tagayas wants to add this as a bullet point. Reconsider the committee's recommendation to demolish historic fire stations in the former East Milton Library and consider repurposing the buildings for other municipal or private use should they be found unsuitable for the fire department. I'd like to assure the town clerk you will end up with this, but see if anyone else needs it in the interim. Yes, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Mary Kelly, Precinct 9. Just a question. What does the East Milton Library have to do with the Fire Study Committee? Is that in the purview of your charge?
Oh. That's a good point.
Mr. Morash, respond?
Yes, Mr. Morash, you're recognized. Seems like there might be a connection.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. One of the things we called for was looking at a number of different locations if the plan was finalized to what we could do with East Milton Square with the engine company over there. And we looked at moving it down to Granite Ave, to the development down there, the state property. We looked at putting it on the deck. And we looked at some other areas with it, keeping it where it is. And we looked at refurbishing that firehouse. And we looked at other sites in East Milton that might give us some better run times. We are always handcuffed, if you will, by the fact that whatever we wanted to do, we need to look at town-owned property at the time. The only place that we saw in East Milton that met that type of thing would have been either A, keep it where it is in East Milton Square at the present location, or move it across the highway and put it at the site of the former East Milton Library. Again, initial report that we put out, that's one of the reasons we asked to have this consultant brought on board to review those kind of findings. And that's I can tell you that we are up to, we think this is a premature motion in that we don't have any real plans to come back to this town with. Right now it's just concepts. Once a plan is put together and there may be surplus property available to the town. That is not the purview, I believe, of the Fire Space Needs Committee. That's the purview of the selectmen to decide what they would do with surplus property. So we think that's not appropriate for this, and I don't know, might even be considered out of scope. I heard that once mentioned for this project.
So, Mr. Morash, I think for clarity, because I suspect there are other town meeting members, Mr. Tagayas' motion says reconsider the committee's recommendation to demolish. Although you're not a building committee, might the Fire Space Needs Committee recommend not using an existing fire station?
Mr. Murray, that is correct.
And so I think that what this addition does, and I'm just trying to interpret for the benefit of everybody here, is saying to reconsider. Mr. Gaius, it might have been better to say consider, because it's an assumption there that they've made a decision to demolish. Mr. Gaius, is that the assumptions intended?
Right. If you feel that language would better reflect my intent, I'm fine with that change. I am reacting to the recommendations that were presented at the annual town meeting, where it was actually recommended by the committee that those buildings be demolished. And what I would like to have this study do is to consider an option which does not demolish any of the buildings. And if that means that other sites other than municipal properties have to be looked at, then I think it's worth looking at those.
Mr. Gaius, can I see you for a minute, please? Okay, folks, I'm going to clarify what's going on and try to square away some of the administrivia here. Basically, Mrs. Tagayas has agreed that to change the beginning of this to clarify the intent that would be consistent with what Mr. Morash's concerns were. And so what I read you previously said reconsider the committee's recommendation to demolish, et cetera, et cetera. It would now reconsider avoiding any recommendation to demolish. Okay? So the motion, I'm going to make the motion on behalf of Mrs. Tagayas. Look to see it's seconded. On behalf of Mr. Tagayas, it's consider avoiding any recommendation to demolish historic fire stations and the former East Milton Library, and consider repurposing the buildings for other municipal or private use should they be found unsuitable for the fire department. So that motion to amend has been made. Has it been seconded? It's been seconded. Mr. Morash, would you accept this as a friendly amendment onto your list of bullet points?
Mr. Moderator, we accept this as a friendly amendment.
Thank you. Okay, so the Warrant Committee would support that being accepted as a friendly amendment. So we're back now to the main motion. It's all of what was printed in your warrant with the addition of Mrs. Tagayas' add. Is there any more discussion about the motion? This will require a majority vote. All those in favor of the recommendation of the Warrant Committee say aye. Opposed, no. It's unanimous. Congratulations.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Thank you, town meeting.
Folks, we have 2 articles left. 3? No, I think we have number 12 and number 15. Oh, and 16. Wishful thinking. All right, so let's move on to Article 12. You'll find that on page 31 of your warrant. It's Article 12 to amend the zoning bylaws, Section 6, subsection D, accessory structure height. I'm going to read you the recommendation. It's recommended the town vote to amend Section 10 of the general bylaws, known as the zoning bylaws, by striking paragraph 1 of subsection D in Section 6, and by substituting the following paragraph 1. In a residence AA, A, B, or C district, no building except a one-story building of accessory use not greater than 21 feet in height above the average grade of the building footprint shall be erected and maintained within 30 feet of the rear lot line, provided that no building need to be set back from the rear lot line more than 30 feet of the mean depth of the lot, and further provided that if there shall be a retaining wall within 30 feet of a rear lot line which raises the average grade of the building footprint, the rise in average grade shall be deemed a part of the height of any one-story building of accessory use constructed thereon. This is submitted by the Planning Board. It will require a 2/3 vote. Mr. Whiteside, you're recognized.
Alexander Whiteside, Chairman of the Planning Board. In 2011, the town meeting passed a similar article to this, which restricted the height of an accessory building within 30 feet of a rear lot line to 20 feet above grade, and which provided that if there were to be a retaining wall raising the grade in this area, the rise in grade would be included as part of the height of the accessory building. The advertisement for this 2011 article stated the height of the accessory building could be 21 feet rather than the 20 feet specified in the warrant. On account of this discrepancy, the town meeting is now being asked to approve this article with the height of the accessory building set at 21 feet as originally intended. And the Planning Board recommends that the town meeting do so.
Thank you, Mr. Whiteside. Does anyone else wish to speak to this motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the recommendation of the Warrant Committee say aye. Opposed, no. It's unanimous. We're now on to Article 15, which you will find on page 36 of your warrant. Article 15, authorization for acquisition of easements. To see if the town will vote to authorize the Board of Selectmen during fiscal year 2015 to acquire on behalf of the town any or all easements for any of the following purposes: roads, sidewalks, vehicular and/or pedestrian access, or passage, drainage, and utilities, and to abandon or relocate easements acquired for any of the foregoing purposes, and to act on anything related thereto. This is submitted by the Board of Selectmen. It will require a 2/3 vote. We have a revised recommendation. Thank you. I was just looking to see if we had that. I suspect it was on my green sheet, pink sheet. Wait a minute. A second pink sheet. No, that's Article 15. Yep, that's it. Okay. Okay, so folks, it's a one-page pink sheet with just a recommendation at the top, of which I will read to you now. That is the recommendation of the Warrant Committee. It's recommended the town vote to authorize the Board of Selectmen during fiscal year 2015 to accept on behalf of the town, except with respect to real property that is located in a business district or on which a multifamily dwelling consisting of more than 6 units is constructed or proposed to be constructed, any and all easements for any of the following purposes: roads, sidewalks, vehicular and/or pedestrian access or passage, drainage and utilities, and to abandon or relocate easement acquired for any of the foregoing purposes, provided, however, that such authorization shall pertain only to easements accepted, abandoned, or relocated at no cost to the town. Does anyone wish to speak to this? Yes, Mr. Hayes.
This is Ted Hayes, your Warrant Committee Chairman. The Warrant Committee has not yet voted on this amendment, so I just wanted to make that clear. We will soon.
Thank you. Katie Conlon, Chair of our Board of Selectmen, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The revised recommendation that appears on the pink sheet is a proposal that we are submitting to the Warrant Committee. With the changes would be our request that they consider and make this their revised recommendation. We have one further change to make to it as well.
Okay, so so hold on, because I guess I want to make sure I'm not confused. Okay, so folks, typically when we have a revised recommendation that's pre-printed and ready to pass out, it's one that's already been vetted and voted by your Warrant Committee. I read it with that assumption. That assumption is incorrect. So based on the remarks by a chairman of our Board of Selectmen, I suspect that this is a revised recommendation. She wants to amend the recommendation which was printed in your warrant. So it's now a revised recommendation. That's a motion. Let's consider that a motion has been made by the chairman of the Board of Selectmen. Has that motion been seconded? It's been made and seconded. Now, Mrs. Conlon, I recognize you to explain to the body and to the Warrant Committee the purpose for this revised recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. We're proposing some changes to the recommendation of the Warrant Committee in response to questions and comments that we've received from a few town meeting members. This is a broadly written article, and the initial recommendation was broadly written to allow the board to acquire a variety of easements for various circumstances. So the amendments, and I'll go over what the changes are, the amendments that we're proposing is to narrow the scope of what your authorization to the board would be, because of the concern that were expressed by some town meeting members about the broad authorization that was initially sought. And town council is available to answer questions about practices in other towns, but the article that was submitted by the board is based on language that's used annually in other towns, town warrants. The changes are that in line 2, the word acquire has been changed to accept, so it doesn't authorize the, it's a narrower word. It allows the board to accept an easement rather than to go out under other circumstances to take an easement. We've added at the end of line 2 and right through line 5, the except with respect to real property that is located in a business district or on which a multifamily dwelling consisting of more than 6 units is constructed or proposed to be constructed. Those are obviously large projects, and we're in agreement that easements that we may want to acquire for those projects could be voted by town meeting at a town meeting, whether it's in the fall or in the spring. We also added the last 2 lines, which is a carve out so that none of the, by you authorizing the board to accept an easement, there would be no payment made by the town in those circumstances. So it says, provided that such authorization shall pertain only to easements accepted, abandoned, or relocated at no cost to the town. That's a further narrowing of what was initially sought. We have one further change, Mr. Moderator, that we'd like to propose, and forgive me, Ted, I'm not sure if I mentioned this to you earlier in the evening. We'd like to delete the word roads, which appears at line 5. After any of the following purposes, colon, we have roads, sidewalks. We'd start with sidewalks and delete the word roads before it. So we're happy to answer questions, but those are our reasons for narrowing this article. It's in response to questions and comments that we received from some of our fellow town meeting members, and we hope the warrant committee will see fit to recommend a narrower recommendation and a narrower authorization for the board. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am, you're recognized.
Kathleen O'Donnell, Precinct 7, and I'd like to thank the board and town council for taking into account my comments on this warrant article. I will speak that from my experience in other cities and towns that it is a relatively common practice to have this sort of authorization, but I did want to point out that I would not have roads created and accepted for this way. That's avoiding a whole statutory process, and so I thank the board for deleting that word from this. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Shea, you're recognized.
I want to, Richard Shea, Precinct 9 Town Meeting Member. I want to thank the selectmen for putting the new recommendation in. I perhaps was one of the town meeting members who brought the idea to you people, and I appreciate your reaction, but I'm sure there were many others. I really, really like your recommendation, but by the way, if you're removing roads, does it say that's for vehicles, though? You're eliminating roads. That's okay? Okay. Well, I rise to ask your help in defeating this article. Right now, if someone wants to take a piece of your property and use it for sidewalks or whatever, you have a right to come before town meeting and plead your case. Here, we're turning it over to the selectmen, and all you need is 2 selectmen to decide your fate. We represent the citizens in the town. That's why we're here. And I think that in representing the citizens, we should be looking out for their welfare. The article now has some boundaries, which I felt it didn't in the beginning, but it does have some boundaries. But we're turning over authority to town meeting, from town meeting to the selectmen. I know they only want it for 1 year, but I think some comment there that they might try to renew it. But really, why do they want it? Do you know? I've asked, we've asked, and they said originally it was for the benefit of the temple. Well, we know now it's not for the benefit of the temple. Then they said that it was for a Safe Walk to Schools program. But we've known about that for about 1.5 years, and that could have been brought to town meeting. So if there's a reason why this authority is shifted from town meeting, we should know it. It should be in the article. And I'm sure I'm going to get rebuttals, and I heard one already, but it is good government. Well, is there any better government than the democratic government we have right here at town meeting? I don't think so. Other towns did it, do it, but they're not on the list as one of the best 10 towns to live in the country. Why are we following them? Google Reading, see what shape that town is in. They're one of the towns that did it. I'm not saying the shape is in because of that, but we certainly shouldn't copy them. because they did it. You'll be told, too, that it will speed things up. Well, if you're going to take somebody's property, I don't want a quick decision. I don't think that's right. That's not right. I was watching the committee's work on television. Matter of fact, I lost a lot of sleep watching them. But I commend you people. You people really put some time in, really. And I don't know how you can have a job and have a family and do this. It's amazing. And I personally thank you. I saw the town planner and the chairman of the selectmen in front of you people giving the reasons for this. And with those reasons, I felt I had a very logical premise followed by another logical premise, and therefore I could come to a logical conclusion. And the logical conclusion I came to is why I'm standing here. I'm not going to ask you for your premises or your logical conclusion, but I'd like you to think about it and come to a logical conclusion. You represent the people that put us in this place, and we should be looking out for their welfare. There's a famous saying which I often refer to, and a lot of government work refers to it. I'm sure all lawyers have heard it, but it was Lord Acton from the British Parliament who said that power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. And I think that we at town meeting can keep some of the authority and protect our citizens. So I'd like you to reject this article. There were parts of it I like, but it's just turning over authority from the town meeting. And I think we should protect our citizens and stick up for them. And if they have a problem, then we can plead their case here. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we continue, I want to explain something procedurally. So when I read this, I thought this was, in fact, going to be the recommendation of the Warrant Committee. It's not. So we have a motion to amend in front of you. I just wanted to let you know that this discussion is about the motion to amend. Well, the amendment is replacing the entire thing. We're going to take a vote on that. That will require a majority vote. You may vote to accept this. You may vote to defeat this. If you vote either way, then they're going to be back to the main motion, and either voting this again with 2/3 or voting the original language in the warrant with 2/3. So I just wanted to clarify that. Yes, ma'am, do you wish to be recognized? I point out to the town meeting members that occasionally voters, registered voters of the town request the permission to speak. This lady has requested and has been granted permission to speak. You're recognized.
Thank you. Marie Theodot, 46 Clifton Road. Once again, thank you very much for allowing me to speak tonight. My property abuts the DPW site, and a few years ago, there was a discussion about having a mall in Milton. And I was approached to actually sell my property, and there was a possibility that it could have been taken. Now, coming here yesterday evening and this evening and seeing the process, I feel that, or it's in my opinion, that we vote this article down. I would like to see that this process still be with the town meeting. It allows us allows a property owner the opportunity to actually have their concerns to be met. And if they're going to allow it unilaterally to only a small group of people, then we're not going to have the opportunity to actually voice our concerns. And I think that if we decide to vote this article to pass, we're going to go down a slippery slope, even if it's only for 1 year. Within a year, many things happen. And it has come to my understanding there are several projects that are happening here in Milton. And if we give that authorization, who's to say that something that we here in this room are against will not be decided without our authorization. So I really encourage that everyone here votes this article down.
Thank you. Mr. Mullen, you're recognized. Oh, I apologize.
Peter Mullen, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 2. I think there's considerable amount of confusion about this article and what it does. I'd direct everybody to the second line of the revised recommendation. And what this article does, I believe, is authorize the selectmen during the coming fiscal year to accept, on behalf of the town, easements. It doesn't give them the authority or the power to acquire easements, to take anyone's property. All it does is authorize them to accept easements that people want to give for the purposes of access to something. They have to cross somebody's property to get to some town property or something like that. I think it's just a housekeeping matter. I think rather than having to run every one of these by town meeting in order to have them recorded in the land records, it just avoids the need to do that by one general authorization. If my understanding is wrong, I'd ask that town council or someone else correct me, but I think that's all that this does.
Thank you. Katie Conlon, Chairman of the Board of Selectmen, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, and thank you, Mr. Mullen. That is correct, and that's what we wanted to respond to. That point was made by Dr. Shea that this would authorize a taking. That is not the case. The previous word acquire would have contemplated taking or other means. We're changing the word through this amendment from acquire to accept, so that it's passive. It's the town accepting easements on private property where there's a reason for the property owner to give those easements to the town. And it is contemplated that this article would only cover fiscal year 15, the current fiscal year, but we would anticipate that this would become an annual town meeting article, and we would see it like the revolving funds. We'd see this article every year. Mr. Moderator, would you be willing to recognize Joe Lynch, the chair of our
Absolutely.
head of our DPW, to speak a little further to the need for this and why this article arose? Thank you.
While Mr. Lynch is approaching it, I do want to try to add some clarity because I think it's important on behalf of some of the members that have spoke. Originally, the recommendation printed in the warrant did say to acquire. And I suspect that was what led Dr. Shea and others to say that was going to give the authority to a small group of people just to take. So among the changes in this revised recommendation is just to accept, so there is no taking, as Mr. Mullen points out, along with a few others. And now that that's clear to me, by the way, I'm learning this as we go. Mr. Lynch, you're recognized.
I'm happy to report, sir, I have no PowerPoint tonight, and I won't get confused.
I appreciate that.
For the first time in many years, I completely agree with Mr. Mullen, and I apologize for that reference, but it's nothing more than a housekeeping measure. This is done routinely across the Commonwealth in cities where a city council exists. When they meet weekly, they're the legislative body, and they can accept easements or take easements, if they will, every single week. Here in a town meeting, form of government, we are hamstrung, and there are very definitive projects that are well engineered and well surveyed well in advance that we can anticipate those needs, such as the Safe Routes to School program, and quite frankly, funded by federal highway money, is a very onerous process of securing what is called right-of-way. More importantly, every single year through the entire construction season, we're faced with what we call our transitional work behind the